Welcome into Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast. I am Chris Welsh, aka The Welsh, and today we're talking about wide receiver tiers with our top 50 wideouts. This one is going to be a tough fight, my friends, and our two contestants who are going to battle it all out in a wide receiver tier rank brawl to the bloody end in one corner/box. It is Fantasy Pros and Betting Pros, Joe Pisapia. In the other box is this guy that I've heard of before, and I'm fairly relatively similar related with, is Scott Bogman of In This League, Fantasy Pros, and the Dynasty Football Podcast. This match is not going to be on the pay-per-view. No, my friends, it'll be right here on Fantasy Pros YouTube channel, so make sure you are subscribed so you're notified when we do awesome stuff. And when you do, you're already halfway there to enter in our newest giveaway, a free one-of-a-kind Ultimate Custom Championship belt, courtesy of our friends over at Trophy Smack. All you need to do is subscribe to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel right now, comment below on this video, and that is it. We'll be announcing a winner right here on the channel, so make sure to turn on those notifications so you can be alerted when new episodes are up and to claim your prize. Gentlemen, strap in, let's go, because we're talking about wide receiver tiers. As was said in the previous episodes, you guys got all the fun ones, the superlatives, the A, the B, the C, the D, the F. We're going all the way down here, but we're going to start at the very top. Here's the problem with you two. You're the same. You got them both on here. So, Mr. Editor, please, under the S superlative tier, put Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. But here's the difference. Bogman, you are one of the only football guys here at Fantasy Pros that isn't a Jamar Chase stan. So what I would tell you is make the case for Justin Jefferson over Jamar Chase, and why are these guys wrong, and is there any real separator between the two?
Right. I would say that Joe Burrow is a better QB, but I would say the Vikings have not as good a defense as the Bengals do. So they have to pass more. Also, a team that passes a ton. They're both very, very good. Jefferson is my number one. I understand why Chase could be your number one, right? Because he doesn't have to contend with Jordan Addison or TJ Hawkinson in his offense. I get it, but T. Higgins is still very, very good as well. Joe Burrow's already a little nicked up. So give me that Percocet to Justin Jefferson combo. That's what I want.
Joey, 17.9 points per game in half-point PPR last year for Justin Jefferson. 2 more points than Jamar Chase.
You're the Jefferson guy too, Joe.
I know,
but
I'm the
apparently.
Jefferson guy. No, I am. Look, I had the same. Look, we did this. Billy Muzio and I fought. If you want to hear about all of this stuff here going back and forth, we did a similar episode where we're basically trying to pit me against everybody here at Fantasy Pros arguing about wide receivers. So there's an audio podcast of Billy and I arguing about this. And interesting enough, Jamar was ahead of Jefferson in his rankings too until the Burrow injury, so we had to come back around a little bit. Yes, I am the Justin Jefferson guy. I've got the t-shirt to back it up. I was the guy saying last year, take him one overall, period. My only thing is this: I keep looking at the history of the league, and it's really hard to be the number one guy more than 2 years in a row. You're looking at, like, you know, the days of Antonio Brown's peak. You know, you got a couple of Jerry Rice years in there, but it doesn't happen all that often. And I think what I saw towards the end of last year was very telling. And I'm not trying to put too much into that one game we saw at the end of the season where, unfortunately, it was championship week and Justin Jefferson basically got shut down. I think people are starting to catch up and saying, all right, we have to make other people beat us. And not every team has the right personnel to do that. I think, to Bogman's point too, he kind of alluded to, Joe Burrow is the better quarterback. And I think if you get Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase together for 17 games, I do think he will finish ahead of Justin Jefferson right there, right at that pinnacle. And to tell you the truth, again, it doesn't matter. You should be happy with either of these two guys. We're splitting hairs. I just think right now, if Joe Burrow shows you in the next couple weeks he is healthy, then I'm ready to go ahead and take Jamar Chase over him. However, I am very happy, extremely happy. In fact, I am thrilled to take Justin Jefferson one overall because he's already proven he could be that guy. It's just a matter of that law of averages for me on top of what I saw at the end of the year, which is a couple games where you started to see some people start to pick up on what the Vikings were doing. And I think, I don't want to say the book is out, but I think people are realizing, look, this guy's just dominating everybody. We can't let this guy beat us. We got to find clever ways to do it. And the league will adjust to everybody eventually. That's what the league does.
One of the things I just want to bring up here into this whole point is, you know, yes, you'd be happy with either one of these guys. Sure. And yes, when we're talking about tiers, you can throw both of these players on. But what is important to know is that you will have the definitive decision most likely if you're in the spot to take these players. So you are directly taking one over the other most of the time. Let's say you got the first overall pick, like Debo and Erickson, especially Erickson, who has Jamar Chase at number 1 overall. If you are definitively taking Chase over Jefferson, that is the big decision. It's not just like, hey, one of these guys I'd really rather have.
It's not a heavy decision, to tell you the truth, too. What Bogman mentioned also about the Vikings defense being bad. Let's not forget, Jesse Bates is gone. They've lost pieces in the secondary as well, year over year. So I'm not sure about the Bengals secondary either, to be quite frank with you. I think they're going to be a little bit more shootouts.
Hill and Eli Apple being gone is addition by subtraction.
That is addition by subtraction, 100%. This is where the IDP guys start to argue about defense. So there you go. Get ready, everybody. But in all seriousness, like, they are right there. They are 1 and 1A as close as they can be. It is a coin flip. And I think
Christian McCaffrey over both of them.
No, don't say things like that. Yes. This is where the show goes off the rails. Anyway,
okay, but here's my take, though. This is the last thing I wanted to mention with it, though, is that I think what's interesting about this case is you have to make the case for what Justin Jefferson won't do, and you have to make the case for what Jamar Chase has to do when doing this. And one of the biggest pieces of it is you. Well, I'm just saying, Joe, you're saying like, hey, it's just really tough to do this again. Look at 184 targets last year.
I'll make the case for it. You ready? His rookie year, 2022, 87 receptions in 12 games, 9 touchdowns. That's a pretty good start in your rookie year. It's not like he's learning how to work with Joe Burrow. They played together in college. Like, this is just a matter of Chase and Burrow have not been able to, at the same time, be healthy for an entire season. And I think once they are, there's that special. I also think they're going to be challenged quite a bit in this division. The Browns have improved. I think the Steelers are far from a walkover. I think that the Ravens are improved this year. So all of a sudden, more competitive games in division also mean you're pushing that scoring a little bit. I think they're going to have to score more points than they did last year if they're going to continue to be at the top of that division. Whereas I'm looking at that other division in Minnesota, I'll tell you what, man, in that NFC North, you can make a lot of cases where things go backwards in a lot of ways for some of the teams in that division. So look,
easy pickings, Joe. No one has more yards in their first 3 seasons in NFL history than Justin Jefferson.
He's great.
So don't start with that stuff.
He's great.
And Justin Jefferson doesn't have another number 1 next to him. Maybe that's the other thing that you can take a look at. It's a tough argument. They are in the same tiers.
They're both
one of the
great.
coolest things you can have is if you had like the 4th or 5th pick and one of these guys were to fall to you, then you're in a great spot. But if you're making the decision, it is tough. And I kind of see it just a tiny bit as what one has to not do and what the other is forced to do to kind of get into that spot. Those are the superlatives. We are going to talk about the A's, though, but I want to tell you guys that football season clearly is almost here. And if you're like us here at Fantasy Pros, you're planning your stadium trips right now. But just because it's not quite here doesn't mean you shouldn't be looking at all the other type of events you could be doing, like baseball games, concerts, and comedy shows. And the best way to get tickets to any of these is on Game Time, the fastest growing ticketing app in the US. For last minute, amazing deals on tickets to see your favorite baseball team, band, comedian, whoever it is, download Game Time. Again, it's not just sports. You know, August means these huge summer concerts. Joe was just over at Taylor Swift.
That's right.
Comedy shows are going on. Some huge comedy shows coming here locally in Phoenix. They're all across the country, and Game Time has your tickets. Download the Game Time app and redeem code FANTASYPROS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, download the Game Time app and enter code FANTASYPROS for $20 off no matter where you live. Get out, have some fun this week, next week, and all month long. Download Game Time today and enter Fantasy Pros, last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. Friendos, let's move over to the A tier. And Joe, we're going to start with you on this one. Stefon Diggs. You, my friend, are quite low. Bogman has him pretty high. As I'm looking here, Bogman has Stefon Diggs as wide receiver 5, the 3rd guy in the A tier. But Joe, Stefon Diggs did something, and maybe this is part of the whole crybaby stuff that happened with him and Josh Allen or whatever is going on, but you have him at the back end. It looks like you roughly have 11 to 12 wide receivers above him. So, Joe, I'm going to ask you, why do you hate Stefon Diggs?
Oh, what a lovely loaded question that is. I don't hate Stefon Diggs. He's going into his 9th year. I think that's something we should all circle on our calendars and understand that.
It means he's dead.
It means that he's older. It means that he's had a lot of mileage. He's averaged over 160 targets the last 3 years. That's a big workload. And it's not that I don't think Stefon Diggs is still a wide receiver 1. He finished as wide receiver 4 in half-point PPR last year. It's just a matter of I'm looking at some of the guys around him. And some of those players in that tier that I like ahead of him, guys like A.J. Brown, who finishes wide receiver 5, who is younger, also in a fantastic offense. I think is going to be fantastic this year. CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, who in the first 6 weeks of the season is going to have a ton of targets going his way in those full PPR leagues because he's the only wide receiver of real note there. And then it's a matter of starting to look ahead a little bit. And yeah, maybe I am looking a little bit more futuristically and saying, okay, Garrett Wilson, I believe in so much in that talent from what I saw at Ohio State, and I believe so much that Aaron Rodgers is such a significant upgrade even at this point in his career over what the Jets had already, that I'm ready to jump on board with Garrett Wilson because I think he can be a special player, and I think that there really isn't anybody else in there to fight him for targets, to be honest. Once Elijah Moore was gone in that offense, it's very Garrett Wilson-centric as far as I'm concerned, which is good because the history tells us Aaron Rodgers likes to lock in on that one guy and throw him the football a ton. And then there's Jalen Waddle, and once again, I kind of come back to that. Look at the number of targets from Jalen Waddle last year. Look at what they are. They are a team that is going to throw the ball to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle all day long. Now, I know Stefon Diggs has gotten a lot of targets and all those things, and he fits that bill along with these guys. But when you're going to your 9th year in the league, 10th year in the league, I think you have to start to look at that attrition and you start to consider what the future of 2023 is going to be. I think there's a little bit of desperation with the Buffalo Bills, to be honest with you. I think that window, I don't know if it's closing, you start to consider, but it's starting to shake a little bit. And I think they feel it. I think there's a little sense of desperation there. And I think some of these other teams here starting to get better around them in that division. I think it's going to be a tougher road for them. So it's not a matter of not liking Diggs. It's really a matter for me of liking those other guys starting to
I don't know if you guys saw, there's this video out there of Amon-Ra St. Brown. He did an interview and he was talking about that he remembers every single wide receiver that was taken in front of him in the draft. He remembers their name, their school, and how many there were in front of him. And every single day, he has a motivation sheet of his goals for the year.
Sounds like Arya Stark before she went to bed every night. All the people she was going to kill.
And he says the name of every single one of them on a daily basis.
Wow, that's dark.
My whole point, Stefon Diggs should do this to you because you have 9 receivers that are ahead of Stefon Diggs in your ranks here. Bogman, on your take, you've got him at 5 here. This is one of the more higher-powered offenses in the league. This kind of a little bit comes back to similar to what we were talking about before, where I feel like this is projecting what a player cannot do in one of the best offenses here. I think it's hard place to put him too far down, but at the same time, there are weapons and there's a lot of potential growth in that offense. But what say you about Diggs? You've got him at 5 overall, high in your A tier.
Look, there's not a lot of reason to move Diggs down. And I do like a lot of those guys. And look, I'm fine. I wouldn't, start hollering at Joe for taking these guys above Diggs. I have them in the same tier as well. So a lot of them in the same tier as well. So I don't dislike you making points for those guys. I do dislike your desperation thing, because I think if the Bills were desperate, they would have found a way to go get Hopkins. They would have found a way to add somebody, but they didn't, and that's why Stefon Diggs had his little hissy fit or whatever for a couple days when no news was happening. So that was news. If he did that today, nobody would care. They'd be like, oh yeah, he's just away from the team for a couple days. He's fine. It would be a nothing burger, but since it was in the middle of no stories and all that, but this is a pass first offense where they didn't add a second guy. Jalen Waddle has Tyreek, Chase has Higgins. A lot of these guys have a second guy there. He doesn't have anybody there. Were we really afraid? I know people were making the case for Gabe Davis last year. Maybe it makes him a post-hype sleeper this year, but I'm not worried about Gabe Davis taking stuff away from Diggs. I love Kincaid. I think I'm the highest ranker in the world on Kincaid in terms of positional ranks. I have him at 8. Nobody else has him as a tight end 1. I love him. I'm still taking Diggs with no issues as a top 5 wide receiver. I love Diggs, and I think maybe we go a little overboard with falling knife, and that is why I like running backs over wide receivers a lot too. So just my style, the way I'm going to pick. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. We have no need to fix Stefon Diggs.
I have a question for Bogman.
He's my 5th.
My question for Bogman is this. As you see all this positive buzz about James Cook, as you see them be very aggressive to go get Damian Harris, as you see them move up draft capital to take Dalton Kincaid, do you think that they are highly aware of how one-dimensional that offense is, and it's time to spread the wealth a little bit, because
that's not desperation, Joe.
Well, but I'm not saying it's desperate. Oh, well, the desperation is, I'm calling the plays now as the defense, as the head coach calling the defensive plays. That means I'm taking control of this because I'm tightening up a little bit. Look, they have expectations. They've fallen short. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
But the point I'm making is this. I think they have to balance this offense a little bit more. It is very heavy Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, and that has not gotten them to the high point. That has not gotten them to the Super Bowl. And I think that they're aware of that, and I think they're trying to do that. And I think if you couple that along with, again, the wear and tear of Stephon Diggs the last 3 years, I think it's something to be acknowledging. In the 9th year in the league, we've seen so many wide receivers that we all love, that we all think are just lock and load. All of a sudden, they hit that 9th, 10th year, they hit in their early 30s, and all of a sudden the drop-off begins. And I'm not saying, like, I would take Stephon Diggs in the right spot. Of course I would. I'm just focusing on some of the younger players with the upside to continue on that path that they're already on, like A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown's going after him. Why? A.J. Brown was right behind him year over year in terms of scoring.
A.J. Brown has Devontae Smith. Stephon Diggs has no one else. And if you take the ball away from Diggs and give it to James Cook and Damian Harris more, you are cutting off your nose to spite your face, and you should be fired. Like, that is what I think about not giving the ball to Diggs.
Not in January in Buffalo. If you can't run the football in January in Buffalo, you ain't going to the Super Bowl.
Well, run it in January. Our fantasy season stops.
I'll tell you, I don't think it's necessarily desperation. It is becoming more than one-dimensional. Stephon Diggs is a great wide receiver touchdown option, scored the second most touchdowns for wide receivers. So you want to have just a little bit, you want to be a little bit more dynamic. I don't know if that has to take away from him. The targets are just not necessarily going to change in my mind. Let's go to this one. Boggs, we're going to start with you. T. Higgins. One of the reasons I'm kind of making the case that it's tough to take Ja'Marr Chase as the number one is because T. Higgins is viewed as a number one, and you have him in the A tier. Joe, you have him in the mid Bs. So Bogman, you are all in on T. Higgins. So make the case for T. Higgins, especially in this big of a group.
Higgins between these two groups, but look, man, 110 targets, 75 catches, 1,000 yards, and 7 touchdowns, somewhere in that neighborhood. That's what he had last year. 766. I don't think you change. This is just like Stephon Diggs. You don't change this. He is a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 1, borderline guy, somewhere in that neighborhood. In terms of talent, he is with these guys for sure. Ja'Marr Chase is an otherworld talent, so of course he has to get the ball first. But T. Higgins is still great. He has a very high floor still. He's in a contract year 2, I believe. So go make that money, T. And I'm all about Higgins. So I have always said that. People ask me on the Dynasty Show too, Joe. I don't know. Higgins is a 2, and I say you can't look at Higgins as a 2, because if you're doing that, then you look at like Waddle is a 2 as well. There are so many good players. It's an arms race at wide receiver, even in the NFL. So you have to have good ones, and they have 2 of the best, and they throw the ball a ton. So Higgins is absolutely an elite wide receiver.
And Joe, you're pretty decent. I think you might be a little bit more median value to what you guys can check on FantasyPros. If you guys go and check out FantasyPros consensus ranks, is the median value with him kind of about the push for Ja'Marr Chase? Because you can make the case that T. Higgins takes away from Ja'Marr Chase if he boosts up. But if you think the offense gets bigger around Chase and T. Higgins becomes more complementary, then it eats in. Unless you think the Bengals are just simply the Dolphins offense and you can have 2 absolute stud wide receiver ones.
Well, look, you had them last year. They're both studs, and I think they'll be studs again this year. I think Higgins will be knocking on that door of wide receiver 1 again. I think this also is the kind of wide receiver, and we talked about the different philosophies in drafting. You guys, especially Boggs, very heavy running back guys still. I'm more in the wide receiver class. That's where I like to live. So Higgins, I think, is a really appealing guy for those people who draft running back early, and I'll tell you why. Because if, God forbid, something happens to Chase, all of a sudden, Higgins can step in and be a 1 because you've seen him do that already. So that is a very exciting thing where if there is an injury, the upside then becomes exponential. So taking him over a middling wide receiver 1 on another team makes a lot of sense. So again, I like Higgins. It's just a matter of there's just guys I like a little bit more in certain formats. And I do think if I'm planning on and projecting for a career year for Chase and Burrow together, if all things work out the way I think they can, and maybe even a historic one, we're talking like 45 plus touchdown. Like I think that is on the table for that duo together, where Chase could put up an absurd number of touchdowns, absurd number of yards, and Joe Burrow could put up some crazy stats and even challenge for MVP. If that's the case, then it is going to shy Higgins a little bit, but make no mistake, T. Higgins is still a really good investment, I think, in all formats, whether it be half or even full PPR formats.
All right, going to be number one wherever he lands next year.
Somewhere between 10 and 13, 14, he's going to finish there. There's no doubt for me.
This one is a tier A debate. So it's a match within a match, because you have both of these wide receivers, both of you, as your tier A wideouts. But you guys are flip-flopped. We are talking about Garrett Wilson versus Davante Adams. Joe, not the biggest Adams guy in the planet. Bogman, not saying you're not the big Garrett Wilson guy, but you have a complete separator in this round. So this is Garrett Wilson versus Davante Adams. So how this one is going to go, Joe, you're going to make the case for Garrett Wilson. Bogman, you're going to make the case for Davante Adams. So Joe, why don't you kick us off? Why Garrett Wilson is better than Davante Adams?
Well, as I told Billy Muzio last year, I want to remind everybody that I'm the guy telling you draft Davante Adams everywhere because he was going to play with Derek Carr, and he was going way too late. He was going in the second round last year, which was absolutely freaking absurd. Any draft that I was in, I was taking him at the turn every single time. Like, if you let me down there and Davante Adams was there, I'm taking him. This year, it's a little bit different for me because it's not just the downgrade to Garoppolo, which is something that I know collectively a lot of us kind of sigh about. Garoppolo is fine. The thing about Garoppolo is the health of Garoppolo is constantly an issue. And what does the downgrade from the downgrade look like in an offense that could potentially struggle, where there's not a lot of talent, I think, in certain parts of this roster? And if Josh Jacobs does hold out longer, what becomes of, what you can do in this offense? So there's so many questions to me this year. And guess what? This is another guy going into his 10th year. Peak performance for these guys at this level lasts for sometimes a 3-year window, sometimes a 5. We're talking now we're going to have to push to 6 and 7 for Davante Adams. And he is a great player. He is a Hall of Fame caliber player. But I'm trying to look forward a little bit. And I saw flashes of what Garrett Wilson's capable of. And I'm not saying I drink the green Kool-Aid yet of the New York Jets. Not one episode of Hard Knocks is going to completely make me goo-goo-eyed. But I will say this. I think that there's an opportunity here where I'm going to take the younger guy in the better situation with the motivated quarterback as opposed to the reject quarterback who can't stay on the field. And let's be honest, Garoppolo was the rejected quarterback. I'm not trying to be mean here. It's just a fact. And now Davante Adams in his 10th year in the league, I'm trying to figure out how this all works out well. And I still have him as an A tier. He's just not my favorite of the A's because I want to make sure I'm getting it right. And I want to make sure I'm putting my best foot forward with the healthiest, best team I can that has the most upside. And I just worry about the upside of Adams in this season.
Bogman, you mentioned my term. I actually used it. If you guys listen to that audio version of Joe, myself, and Billy Muzio, I used it for a different wide receiver. I don't think we're going to talk about today, DeAndre Hopkins. And the falling knife syndrome is definitely something that I kind of push back against a lot because
we can push back on all we want. You got Julio Jones, you got AJ Green. I mean, we could sit here and go on and on about all these guys who are pillars of the wide receiver community for years.
Your turn is over.
Yeah,
pillars. Your turn is over, Joe. I'm talking now. It's my turn.
Where's Shannon Sharp?
The falling knife, though, you can't go to revisionist pat. You can't go like, well, these guys failed. It's like, okay, but what the whole point is you are chasing the guy that's falling. The DeAndre Hopkins one was a big one. Here, this is kind of a completely different spectrum of an elite wide receiver who gets elite targets, one of still the most elite route runners in the NFL. But Boggs, you are one of the biggest Garrett Wilson guys, especially in draft season. You were selling me and everybody else on him, yet you can't make the move, even though I think Garrett Wilson and Aaron Rodgers are going to be an insane target duo, and he is one of my favorite wide receivers to watch in the NFL, but you're not willing to make that move here in redraft to take that young stud with Rodgers over Davante Adams because you don't think we're near the end? Because if you sniff even 10% of what Joe's talking about, that production does come down, it's not about falling knife. It's actually about catching the wave on others and not eating value. And if Joe is correct about this, so make your case on Adams over Garrett Wilson.
Well, I think we'd all agree that Derek Carr's downgrade from Aaron Rodgers, correct, from last season. And all it led to for Davante Adams was a career high in targets, 180 last season. And for 3 seasons in a row, this dude has had 100 receptions, 1,300 yards, and 10 scores. Yes, he's going to slow down. But when he slows down, what is he? He's probably what I just said about T. Higgins, 75, 1,007, even if he starts to decline. So the floor is enormously high for Davante Adams still. He's still one of the best in the NFL. I love Garrett Wilson. Like you said, I said last year, guys, don't tell me about any other receiver on this team. Garrett Wilson will be the number one at the end of the year, and he was. So I believe in the talent of Garrett Wilson. I have him in the same tier. He's a great wideout. I'm not ready to give up on Davante Adams, even with crappy Jimmy G, because I don't think there's that much of a difference between Derek Carr and Jimmy G.
So let me ask this question. I'm going to ask you both this. What is more likely to happen? Davante Adams declines in production, or Garrett Wilson takes the next step?
Ooh, I'll let Bogman go first.
Garrett Wilson takes the next step.
Thank you.
See, and that is a case for Garrett Wilson.
Say, Joe? What I just not say? Davante Adams takes a step down. Listen with your ears.
But that is the case for Joe here to win this one. I keep hearing with my
ears that you love Garrett Wilson, but not enough.
I do.
Not enough. Not enough to rank him over Davante Adams.
It's an interesting take. All right, gentlemen. All right, to your corners. We're going to move into the B tier. We're going to the B tier of wide receivers. But guess what? We're going to do this again because we have a fascinating wide receiver rank element here of two guys that you guys are on the opposite spectrum of. One of you has said wide receiver in the B tier. The other has that wide receiver in the D tier. So we are talking huge differences. Those two wide receivers, Chris Godwin, who Bogman loves as a B tier wide receiver, and Calvin Ridley, who Joe loves as a B tier wide receiver. I have a personal take on this one, but Boggs, we are going to let you go first. Chris Godwin, you are the highest in the world, according to FantasyPros ECR on Chris Godwin. There's nobody higher. So you make the case of Chris Godwin over Calvin Ridley.
Look, I think the thing for me on Chris Godwin, I think what a lot of people are not realizing, because we think, all right, well, Leftwich is gone, Brady's gone. We cannot throw the ball this many times for Tampa Bay. And you know what? You're right. They can't throw the ball as many times as Tom Brady did last year. But you also can't shift the offense wholly and completely to the run game for a couple reasons. Number one, the line is built to pass block. This is a pass blocking offensive line for the Tampa Bay Bucks. And you didn't add running back talent. You have Rachaad White, who's very good, and I do like him a lot. Who is behind him? UDFA Sean Tucker, Chase Edmonds, and a bunch of nobodies. So you cannot become a ground and pound team like a lot of people think Tampa Bay is going to be, because you don't have the assets for that. Rachaad White can't do what Josh Jacobs did last year and have 400 touches. It ain't going to happen. So they're still going to be passing the ball a lot. You still have Mike Evans, who's going to eat up a number one corner most weeks still, especially around the end zone. He's going to eat up a number one. And Chris Godwin put up great numbers and had a number one overall wide receiver season. I think it was number one overall, is top 3 or 4 season in 2019. It's a long time ago. He's had some knee surgeries. I understand that. But last season, he was great as well. He's still a high floor guy to me. He's still going to be 90 receptions, 1,000 yards, 5 scores. That's the floor to me for Chris Godwin when he's out there. I don't think this offense takes they definitely take a step back without Brady, but I think the passing is still going to be there because that's what this offense is built to do. A lot like Baltimore. I'm not high on the Baltimore wideouts because, yes, Todd Monken's coming in. They're going to be faster. They're going to pass more. Team is still built to run. So you have to run still. Tampa Bay's build is still around passing a ton. They still have to do it because they don't have the assets to make this a ground and pound game. This isn't the Seahawks who can switch from Walker and Charbonnet to their 3 great wide receivers. They are.
Joe, this has kind of become a little bit of like old versus new in how some of these have worked out. I will tell you, I think Calvin Ridley is one of the most divisive wide receivers in fantasy this year. But as far as this goes, I do side on the massive talent that is Calvin Ridley in an offense that is built to be more high flying over a Tampa Bay offense that is struggling. But these are two huge differences. You also kind of hate Godwin. You've got him as a D tier wide receiver. Yeah. But this is about making your case for Ridley over Godwin.
Okay. Part of that has to do with addressing something that Scott Bogman said. The offensive line might be built for throwing the football. However, neither of the quarterbacks that they have in-house are built for throwing the football at the NFL level. So let's talk about that. 733 pass attempts for Tom Brady last year, 719 the year before, 610 the year before that. You are not going to sniff 600 pass attempts from this offense in 2023. Okay, so let's bring that back down to reality. And the year before, where Boggs was talking about how good Chris Godwin was, that was the year that Jameis Winston basically was let out and to run around the NFL and just throw 8 million times to whoever he wanted, sometimes his team, sometimes the opposition. It was a fun thing to watch. No. They ain't gonna let Kyle Trask do that, and they ain't gonna let Baker Mayfield do that, because what's gonna happen is this: they're gonna let Baker Mayfield try, and when it fails, they're gonna want to evaluate Kyle Trask. We've been down this road. We know how this story ends. I don't think Chris Godwin gets to 1,000 yards. Bogman's not wrong in the sense of he's looking for chaos theory here with Godwin, where they're behind and they're just chucking balls all over the place. I don't think they can move the chains enough to get in a position to get there. If anybody out there, listen to me, everyone. If anybody out there is looking for Chris Godwin and anybody from the Bucs offense to help you win championships this year, you're looking at the wrong team in Florida. You are way off. You're looking at the wide receivers named Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. Those are the guys in Florida that can help you. I know, but I'm just saying, don't even waste picks. Instead, you got Calvin Ridley, also in Florida, who can help you win a championship. And I'll tell you why. Because Calvin Ridley, well, I'm going to gamble on him. Calvin Ridley is one of these guys where preseason does matter. It doesn't matter for a lot of players in the NFL. It matters for him for a few reasons. New playbook, new quarterback, and the guy hasn't played. And everybody who is concerned with Ridley, who hasn't played, is right. There is a line, though, for me. Like, I have at wide receiver 18. I think Billy mentioned on our audio version of this show that he was somewhere around, wide receiver 15 in FFPC, which, by the way, fantasypros.com/championship, go win $1 million. Use the promo code FantasyPros. See what I did there? I'm helping everybody get $25 off your entry and go draft Calvin Ridley, but not at 15. That's too high. Because in those high stakes leagues, especially, people are trying to push and look for the splash guy that can really go ahead. But the problem is, I think we're forgetting in most casual leagues, there will be fear in the marketplace when it comes to Calvin Ridley, that people will still be like, he hasn't played. I don't know what's going on. That's when you take advantage of it. I drafted him as my wide receiver 2 in flex this weekend. So I put my money where my mouth is if I'm going to gamble on a player, but there is a line where it becomes too much of a risk. But I see the reward being so much greater with Trevor Lawrence and what we saw out of him emerging last year and the confidence of a generational quarterback talent, as opposed to Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask and putting my fantasy faith in them. No, thank you. I'm out.
This battle is getting a little testy between these two. So I want you guys to take a breath and hear me out here, because I got something that could help. Now, the only thing better than spending summertime outside with friends like you guys is spending it outside with friends with beer. Scott Bogman, Joe Pisapia, you guys are my S tier of friends and beer choices, and I think you two could maybe go to use one right now. But it can't just be about any beer. It's got to be Miller Lite, the 96-calorie beer that tastes like beer and is perfectly brewed for everything summer has to offer. I've been telling you this. Let Miller Lite be the Pied Piper for your fantasy league this year. What do I mean? Start an in-person draft. So you call your friends, you go, before they can say anything.
An in-person draft?
Right when they
What's
pick
that,
up,
Welsh?
They go, ring, 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 click, yo, what's up? Crack open that Miller Lite, and then watch your league mates lock into an in-person draft and tons of fun. With Miller Lite in your hand, summer doesn't taste just great. It tastes like Miller Lite. To get Miller Lite delivered right to your door, visit MillerLite.com/FantasyPros. That's MillerLite.com/FantasyPros. Or you find it pretty much anywhere that sells beer. Celebrate responsibly. Milwaukee Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. 96 calories and 3.2 carbs per 12 ounces. All right, gentlemen, we have a few more B-tier wide receivers we need to talk about. And let's move it to Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen, Joe, is a B-tier wide receiver. Bogman says no, sir. He's not having any of it. So, keep the hands clean, hands where I can see them here. Joe, make the case for Keenan Allen still being that B-tier wide receiver.
Well, this is hard because I don't want to make too hard of a case. I'm just going to look at Keenan Allen and say, look, in PPR formats, as long as that hamstring is still attached to him, I think the ADP makes sense. Wide receiver 19, again, he's going in the same spot as DeAndre Hopkins. And I loved, if you want to talk about comparing the talent of these two guys, that's not a conversation we're having here. We're talking about the fantasy relevance. So am I going to take Keenan Allen on the offense of the charge with Justin Herbert throwing the football, an offense that we know wants to throw the football, is going to need to throw the football in games where he's got to compete against Patrick Mahomes? Or do I want to invest in DeAndre Hopkins and Ryan Tannehill and, God forbid, Will Levis or Malik Willis should they ever end up having to play? And we all know Ryan Tannehill is not playing 17 games. So let's all come clean with that right now. So Keenan Allen is more of a value pay for me, where wide receiver 19 right now, it makes sense on the ADP. I'm seeing it everywhere. It also is whether or not you want to start to buy into him, or you want to buy into some of those other guys in that universe, which is Jerry Jeudy, which again, that's a real close one for me. Drake London still working on the quarterback situation. DJ Moore, who I like a lot, still a lot of new. There's nothing new here when it comes to Keenan Allen and Justin Herbert. I've seen it. It works. It's just a matter of can he stay healthy? And I have more faith in Allen staying healthy than I do in Mike Williams, who I'm not touching this year with a 10-foot pole. So yeah, it's not that I adore Keenan Allen. It's that the situation is really good. I think the value is right. So it just makes sense. And my value is kind of where ECR is and where ADP is, whereas Bogman's is not.
Yeah, Bogman, is this about, like, there was a time where you would say target 1 was Allen and maybe 1B was Eckler, or you could inverse it. And now it's a situation where you've got Mike Williams, you got Quentin Johnson, Josh Palmer looks fantastic in camp early on. Is this about the amount of weapons and the little bit of a decline in Keenan Allen that's brought him down?
No, to me, I was done with Keenan Allen when he was questionable and then active and then played 1 snap and left the game. I'm done. I am done with the Q next to his name every single week. Him and Mike Williams, I'm done. I can't wait till they're off this team and Quentin Johnson and somebody else, maybe Palmer, are the 1-2, and they don't have that questionable next to their name every single week. It drives me nuts. Keenan Allen is a great talent. He's still one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. I will never take that away from him, but I can't take the questionable every single week. It's been hamstring problem after hamstring problem after hamstring problem. With Mike Williams, it's his whole body. I don't like it. No, thank you.
To Bogman's point, I think Quentin Johnson is the best return on investment of any of the wide receivers on this team because he's going a lower ADP. So I think that's something you should always consider, which is you can like a player, you can rank a player above another player. But then we start talking about return on investment in ADP. If you're going to take shots in offenses, the Quentin Johnson one is much more cost effective than certainly Mike Williams, and very much more than Keenan Allen. Where I struggle with Boggs' rankings is he's got Pittman over Keenan Allen, which I just don't know if there's enough passing yards in that offense to support that theory potentially. Even if
we're going to talk
questionable
about
hamstring Pittman. Keenan Allen is questionable every week. You're right. You're 100% right.
We'll talk about Pittman. Let's get one more B in, and then we're going to have to kind of burn through when we get to C's here.
One more
I got to ask
before
about
you show
this
me
one.
Your C's. Okay.
That's how we say it, initials. Deebo Samuel. Bogman, you have Deebo as a B. Joe has him as a C. It's a lot of mouths to feed. You could actually make that argument for the cheapest of options in the San Francisco lineup being one of the best returns, which is Brandon Ayuk, if you want to talk about a big 4. But Deebo has worked really, really heavy on fixing himself physically, trying to be healthier. He wants to stretch the ball out. He had one of the lowest ADOTs in the entire league, but he also had the highest yards after the catch, highest YAC guy. So make the case real quick why you have Deebo as a B-tier wide receiver.
Yeah, I just can't quit Deebo. The talent is so enormous for him. He can do it from anywhere. You got to design plays for him. And I think Shanahan is a guy that's going to do that. Obviously, CMC is going to take a lot of those short passes, and, the runs are gone. So with the runs, he was a wide receiver 1. You would have to put him up there. Without that, I think he's a mid-tier wide receiver 2, still a great yak guy, still is going to get in the end zone plenty of times. I'm still in on Deebo. So I believe this is my belief in him fixing himself and Kyle Shanahan designing plays for him. And those two are much more, last year it was a little contentious with the contract and blah, blah, blah. Now they're together. They're on the same page and working. I think it's going to be, I think Deebo's a little bit underrated right now. In this offense, there are a lot of mouths to feed, but I'll take my risk on Deebo still.
You above Deebo in the ranks. So you want to comment on Deebo real quick?
The runs are gone. I mean, Boggs said it himself. I mean, to me, that's the difference. If you look at, Deebo's history too, you want to talk about guys who have had the Q next to their name. Wide receiver 36 finish.
Yeah, but when he's hurt, he's out for the year. We know he's done. He's just done. It's the questionable that I hate.
Well, look, wide receiver 36, wide receiver 93, wide receiver 3, the year they had all those carries, wide receiver 32 last year. So it comes down to also a bit of uncertainty about what's going on here. Once Christian McCaffrey showed up into town, I think it takes away a lot of that possibility for upside for Deebo Samuel. And look, they've got a good offense here. It is a decent offense to invest in. I just don't like the ADP that I have to invest in Deebo. And frankly, if I've got Brandon Ayuk ranked over him, why would I even do that? That's why I'll have 0 Deebo shares this year, and I'll have a lot more Brandon Ayuk shares. But if you're putting to me, Deebo Samuel is going in the same range right now as DK Metcalf over on the consensus ADP on FantasyPros.com, which, takes Yahoo Sleeper, all the different composites and puts them together so you get a real look at what's going on out there in the draft streets. I'm taking DK Metcalf over Deebo. I'm taking Calvin Ridley over Deebo. Like I'm making that calculated risk right now because the uncertainty on who is playing quarterback and what does that look like right now. Hopefully we'll have some clarity in the next few weeks with San Fran, but right now I don't have much, and I have a lot more questions than I have answers right now when it comes to that offense.
All right, we're going to go to the C tier. How this one is going to work is I'm going to let the high person make the case on a guy. If you have a small, tiny retort, you can. C tier wide receivers. Bogman, we're going to start with you because Joe mentioned the guy Michael Pittman. B tier wide receiver. So we've actually hit the middle here on these guys. Talk to me about Michael Pittman falling into this high of a range for you.
Yeah, look, I love Michael Pittman, and I understand he's going to have a rookie quarterback in Anthony Richardson, but those guys tend to rely on one dude a lot. And I think if you're going to in this offense, it's definitely going to be Pittman. He's constantly open. He's a contested catch guy as well. With a quarterback that's not as accurate like Anthony Richardson, you want to gonna throw it to a guy like Jelani Woods, like Michael Pittman, big dudes with huge frames and big contested catch range. That's what Pittman is. He's enormous. He's going to be a touchdown threat as well. He's a number one on a budding offense here, and we don't know what's going on with Taylor right now. So I love Pittman this year.
Yeah, and I said B, C. He's the very tippy top of Bogman's C tier here, where where Joe, you've got him as a D wide receiver. I don't know if you have any small comment.
No, look,
on Michael
I like Pittman. The problem is I worry about the amount of volume and I worry about the quality of the volume, especially with Jonathan Taylor's situation. If Jonathan Taylor is in-house, I feel better because then you can run play action. You can design a lot of specific things where you're getting Richardson out there in space and you're getting the offense looking for Jonathan Taylor. When you take Jonathan Taylor out of that offense, you become very one-dimensional, and I'm very concerned about that because I don't think they have anybody who can step up into that void.
C tier for Joe, Zay Flowers. In the C tier, Bogman's got him as an F. So, Joe, you did a little bit on the audio podcast. Make your case on Zay Flowers being a C.
Look, man, I'm going to have to go out and get myself a Zay Flowers shirt at this point. I feel like, he's my dude. And again, let's talk about it. So the same thing I said to Billy, which is we're looking at these rookie wide receivers. And who's the guy that has been glowing in terms of remarks in camp? Who's the guy that is going out there and looks fantastic getting off the line, who had a fantastic college career, not playing with the greatest, quarterbacks of the SEC or something like that, where you could really look at him and go, oh my goodness, what an incredible talent that guy is. He fights for the football. Yeah, he's a little on the smaller side, and I understand that people are hesitant because the Baltimore Ravens have not been a historically pass-heavy offense, but I think under Monken, they're going to be a little bit more towards that now that they have some weapons. Look, to me, Zay Flowers is wheels up, and Zay Flowers to me has that opportunity to be the number one on the Ravens, to make plays, to be the kind of guy that only has to touch the football a few times to make a fantasy day for you. I think he's got touchdown equity. I think he's got everything you could possibly want. And I think he's got the clearest path to any of these young bucks to go and be the guy this year in the first season.
I know you like him over Bateman, but just very quickly, if you want to make any case, I know you like him, but I know you don't like the offense in general for passing.
Well, number one, the best part about this is you don't have to take him where Joe has him ranked. You can get him at a much better value than where Joe has him ranked, which makes him a great value. He could turn into that guy, but Mark Andrews is the number one. They concentrating a lot in camp about throwing to the running backs, which is not something that they've done before, which would take away from everybody in terms of receptions and passing. So for me, I like Zay, but I'll take him right around where he's going, not any higher.
Boggs, this is a big one. Cortland Sutton, C tier wide receiver, big old F for Joe. So Cortland Sutton been looking a little bit better, but do you like him over Jerry Jeudy, and why do you like him so much in the Denver offense?
I do, and it's because Sean Payton has given him so much credit here, and he had him studying, Michael Thomas's 2019 tape. I don't think he's going to do that. He's not that talented, but Michael Thomas had 189 targets that year. If he can get up to 150, only one guy with 150 targets in a PPR league over the last 5 seasons has finished below wide receiver 13. That was DJ Moore with only 4 touchdowns. Sutton can get in the end zone. I love him in this offense as the first look.
You can ask David Arquette to study the film of Edward Norton. He's not going to be that good of an actor at the end of the day.
Blah, blah, blah. Joe, it's the targets. It's the targets. The number one guy.
All right, let's go over to the D tier. How this one is going to work, we are just going to be buying at current ADP. Joe, we're going to start with you. Okay. Jahan Dotson. Are you buying Jahan Dotson at his current ADP value?
In half PPR, I think he's an interesting get. Yeah, I think I am. I'm actually more confident in him than Jordan Addison, who's going right neck and neck, to be honest with you. He's been in the league a year already. I do have a lot of questions about the quarterback. That is fair, and who that's going to be. I think at the end of the day, it's going to be Brissett. But Dotson is a guy that I think I can tolerate there, especially in the half, because he seems to have a nose for the end zone. And I think he was a good wide receiver in college. Who, unfortunately, that year Penn State, Boggs will tell you, I mean, how many quarterbacks did they go through? So I think it really hurt his stock. And I think it's hurting his stock in the NFL too, quite frankly. If they can get this kid with any sort of consistent quarterback play, I think he could really improve.
Jahan Dotson at that ADP.
Bye. I mean, this is a Kmart version of the Bengals where you have Chase and Higgins. This is, McLaurin I think is better, but Dotson is still very, very good. So I still like Dotson.
DeAndre Hopkins, D tier wide receiver, buy or sell Boggs at his current ADP.
I
thought so.
Yeah. There we go. Finally, me and Boggs. Just like me and Muzio at the end all came together.
Tennessee is where they go to die.
Yeah,
that's where Julio went.
So Joe, we're gonna put Joe as a sell on there. You mentioned his name, but we didn't get the take. Jordan Addison, Joe, buy or sell at his current ADP, which is in the high 30s.
The number 2 in that offense is TJ Hawkinson, folks. Like, everybody needs to have this moment where they realize that, and go back and watch the tape, and go back and look at the targets that guy got in the last 8 weeks of the season, and the 11 that he got in the playoff game. TJ's that other guy. So Addison might have some moments there. I think Addison becomes an interesting DFS guy this year at the right price, because he'll be cheap in certain matchups where, if it's not Jefferson, it ends up being Addison who has a touchdown or 2 in a game. That would be great. But as a season-long investment this year, to me, he's the least appealing of all 4 of the big rookies.
Boggs, buy or sell?
Buy.
Okay.
They throw enough to sustain 3 guys, and they got rid of the biggest part of the run game this year in Dalvin Cook. They're going to throw enough to get all 3 of those guys involved. So
Kareem Hunt visiting there today, by the way, boys. You see that?
Yeah, very odd. Very odd. Yeah.
I don't either. I'm just saying words.
It might be something. Sky Moore's the last one in the D tier. Boggs, we'll start with you. Sky Moore, buy or sell at ADP? Just buy or sell?
Yeah, I'm buying him, mainly because you go back and you look at Kadarius Toney's health record, and it is garbage. He cannot stay on the field. Sky Moore's already taken all those slot snaps. That was where he went after Kelsey Mahomes last year. So give me Sky Moore. Absolutely.
Joe, buy or sell Sky Moore?
Oh, buy. I'll buy it at this price. I'll buy it even more expensive if I have to. It's all about working out of that slot. And that's what he's going to do this year. And if he's that go-to guy, and again, sometimes I always feel like I'm on this like a year early. And then what I do is I don't invest hard enough the next year. And it burns me every time. I'm not going to make that mistake with Sky Moore this year. Bogman's 100% right. The competition there is wide open. And I think Sky Moore is that guy that steps right in. And I think in year 2, he's going to be a fantastic value. And another guy, again, I just drafted in a league where I'm defending a championship, an expert league. So I'm drafting these guys, not because I'm telling you and I'm making like a big thing. I'm drafting them and I'm telling you to draft them because I'm in there with you. That's what we should be doing together.
All right, last thing, F tier. Joe, make your case for one F tier receiver that you have that you're going to go to war with.
An F tier receiver I'm going to go to war with. This is a tough one for me because, they're in there for a reason. I think at the end of the day, I know on Billy's show that we did on the audio version, I said Rashee Rice. So I'm going to give you one more just to be a little different here. I will say in Courtland Sutton's defense, if Sean Payton can, bring this team up by the haunches and get it to refocus and get it to actually be prepared for an NFL football game, because they were not last year, then I think Courtland Sutton has appeal that he can move from the F tier probably to the C tier for me at some point midseason.
All right, Boggs, I see the name that I think you should pick. So which F tier wide receiver are you going to go to war with? And if you don't say the guy, I'm going to shame you.
Jameson Williams.
There it was.
The 6 weeks. Wait the 6 weeks. The talent is unbelievable. He was still banged up last year, and he still had explosive plays.
That was my second choice. I'm right there with Boggs. It's just the 6 games is real hard for me to get over. It's real hard. It's half of regular season for fantasy. That's a lot.
Not that tough when they're a wide receiver 4 on your bench. When they're a wide receiver 4 or 5 on your bench, though, it's not that tough, my friends.
At least you know where they are for Jameson. So,
it's true.
Gentlemen, You guys did a great job. Who won? Well, the commenters can decide. You guys can get in. You can say who are your favorite picks. That's right. You guys all won with Joe and Bogman debating all these. But you guys can get in and you can start doing that right now. You can actually drop a comment below with your favorite picks from those wide receiver tiers, and you can enter in our newest contest, our giveaway, which is a free one-of-a-kind custom championship belt courtesy of our friends over at Trophy Smack. All you got to do is subscribe to the channel. Then when you make that comment, boom, you are entered in. You can get that going right now, and that is it. We'll be announcing a winner right here on this channel, so make sure you turn on those notifications so you can be alerted when new episodes are up, and you can claim your prize. Why wouldn't you want to do that? One of the great things about Fantasy Pros are the tools. You have the fantasy tools of the fantasy gods right at your hand. You can use the Draft Wizard and pick your favorite analyst ranks, and you can do so much more. You can take Bogman, Joe, put them together. Just go to fantasypros.com/draftwizard today. Thank you to Miller Lite, the taste of summer and fantasy football greatness, and Game Time, the answer to the question, where do we find the best tickets to the greatest games out there? They've got you covered. You can find Joe on Twitter, X at JoePisapia17. You can find Bogman at Bogman Sports. You can also find me and all my chaos at IsItTheWelsh. We're going to run it back again next time with you guys right here on the home of fantasy sports, Fantasy Pros. Bye, friends.